While working as a saleswoman in a luxury jewelry store, the woman froze when she realized the millionaire customer was her husband who died 9 years ago. She got closer and the morning light filtered through the tall windows of Imperial Jewelers, casting rainbow prisms across the mahogany display cases. Emily Walker adjusted the delicate diamond necklace for the third time, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to focus on the intricate clasp. 7 years of working with precious stones had taught her that perfection was everything in this business. But today, her usual steady fingers betrayed her. "You okay, honey?" Grace's voice drifted from the back room where she was polishing the marble floors. At 62, Grace Martinez had been cleaning this upscale Boston jewelry store for over a decade, and it was through her kind recommendation that Emily had landed this job 2 years ago. "Just tired," Emily called back, though exhaustion wasn't the real problem. Lately, she'd been having those dreams again, the ones where Michael was still alive, still laughing at her terrible cooking jokes, still tucking Isabelle into bed with elaborate bedtime stories about brave princesses and magical kingdoms. The brass door chimes announced the first customer of the day, their melodic ring echoing through the quiet store. Emily looked up from the necklace display, her practiced customer service smile already forming on her lips. The words of greeting died in her throat. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stood silhouetted against the morning sun streaming through the doorway. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his posture confident and commanding, but it was his face, that achingly familiar face, that made Emily's world tilt sideways. "Michael," she whispered, the name escaping her lips like a prayer. The man stepped further into the store, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the polished floor. Those eyes, God, those same green eyes that had watched her walk down the aisle in her simple white dress, scanned the jewelry displays with cool detachment. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive slight rasp that used to make her heart skip. "I'm looking for something special, an engagement ring." Emily gripped the edge of the display case, her knuckles white against the dark wood. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. Michael had died 7 years ago in that horrible car accident on Route 95. She'd identified his body. She'd buried him. She'd grieved him. "Sir," the word came out as barely a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. What kind of engagement ring were you thinking?" He moved closer, and she caught that familiar scent. Sandalwood and something uniquely him that no amount of expensive cologne could mask. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was sure he could hear it. Something elegant, timeless. "My fiancé has exquisite taste." He paused at the case displaying their most expensive pieces, studying them with the intensity she remembered from when he used to help Isabelle with her math homework. "Michael," she said again, louder this time, stepping around the counter. "It's me. It's Emily." The man, this impossible apparition of her dead husband, looked up with mild confusion. "I'm sorry. Have we met? I'm William Harper." The name hit her like a physical blow. William Harper. She'd seen that name in the society pages of the Boston Globe, always accompanied by photos of a reclusive financial magnate who'd recently emerged to take over his late father's empire. "No." Emily shook her head, tears already blurring her vision. "No, you're Michael Walker. You're my husband. You're Isabelle's father." A flicker of something, confusion, recognition, passed across his features, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Ma'am, I think you've mistaken me for someone else." His tone was polite but distant, the voice of a stranger humoring a confused customer. "I've never been married before, and I certainly don't have children." The words were like ice water in her veins. Emily studied his face desperately, searching for any crack in this impossible facade. The small scar above his left eyebrow from when he'd fallen off his bike as a kid, still there, the way he unconsciously touched his bottom lip when he was thinking, exactly the same, even the way he stood, slightly favoring his right leg from an old soccer injury. "You have a birthmark," she said suddenly, her voice growing stronger with desperation. "On your shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. You used to joke that it was where an angel kissed you." For just a moment, his composed mask slipped. His hand moved unconsciously toward his shoulder, and something flickered in his eyes. A shadow of memory, perhaps, or recognition. But then the moment passed, and the polite stranger was back, "I think perhaps you should take a break," he said gently, though there was a new wariness in his voice. "Stress can play tricks on the mind." "Emily, what's going on out here?" Grace appeared from the back room, her cleaning supplies forgotten. She took one look at the scene: Emily's tear-streaked face, the well-dressed stranger's uncomfortable expression, and immediately moved to Emily's side. "This is him, Grace," Emily whispered, grabbing her friend's arm. "This is Michael." Grace's face went pale, her dark eyes darting between Emily and the man who called himself William Harper. "Honey, maybe I should go," William interrupted, backing toward the door. "Perhaps I'll return another time when things are less complicated." "No, wait!" Emily lunged forward, but Grace caught her arm. "Let him go," Grace said quietly, her voice strangely tight. "Just let him go." William Harper, Michael Walker, whatever name he was using, paused at the door. For a heartbeat, he looked back at Emily with something that might have been longing, or confusion, or pain. Then he was gone, the door chimes marking his departure with their cheerful, oblivious song. Emily collapsed into the nearest chair, her entire body shaking. "That was him, Grace. I know it was him. The way he moves. His voice, even that little habit with his lip. Emily." Grace's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiral of confusion and desperate hope. "You need to listen to me very carefully. That man is dangerous. Dangerous, Grace. That's my husband, the father of my child. He's supposed to be dead, but he's alive, and he doesn't remember me." Emily looked up at her friend with wild eyes. "How is that even possible?" Grace was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands twisting the cleaning rag she still held when she finally spoke. Her voice was heavy with something Emily couldn't identify. "Sometimes," Grace said slowly, "the dead are better left buried." The words hung in the air like a curse, and Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the store's air conditioning. Outside, Boston bustled with its usual Tuesday morning rhythm. But inside Imperial Jewelers, the world had fundamentally shifted, as Grace retreated to the back room without another word. Emily remained in her chair, staring at the door through which her impossible ghost had disappeared. Her mind raced with questions that seemed to have no rational answers, while her heart clung to the impossible hope that had just walked into her life wearing a stranger's name. The diamond necklace lay forgotten on the counter, its facets catching the light like frozen tears. The rest of Tuesday crawled by like molasses in winter. Emily went through the motions of her job, helping customers, organizing inventory, updating the computer system, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Every time the door chimes rang, her heart jumped, hoping and dreading in equal measure that William Harper might return. By closing time, she'd made up her mind. If Grace wouldn't give her straight answers, she'd find them herself. The Boston Public Library's computer lab stayed open until 9 on weekdays, giving Emily just enough time after work to dive into her research. She settled into a corner terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she typed "William Harper Boston Financial" into the search engine. The results were overwhelming. Dozens of articles from the past 2 years chronicled the rise of William Harper Jr., the mysterious heir who'd emerged from nowhere to claim his late father's massive financial empire. Photos showed him at charity galas, business conferences, and exclusive social events. Always impeccably dressed, always wearing that same distant expression she'd seen in the jewelry store. Reclusive heir finally steps into the spotlight, read one headline from the Boston Business Journal. The accompanying article described how William Harper Sr. had died 3 years ago, leaving behind a billion-dollar legacy, and a son who'd apparently been living quietly abroad. The younger Harper had returned to Boston 18 months ago to claim his inheritance, and had since transformed his father's conservative investment firm into one of the most aggressive players in the New England financial scene. Emily scrolled through image after image, her heart clenching with each familiar gesture frozen in time. There he was, at a hospital fundraiser, his hand positioned exactly the same way Michael used to hold his coffee cup in another photo from a business conference. He was unconsciously touching his bottom lip, that same nervous habit that had driven her crazy when they were dating because it meant he was keeping something from her. The most recent article, dated just 2 weeks ago, made her stomach drop. "Harper Industries CEO announces engagement," screamed the headline. Accompanied by a photo of William with his arm around a stunning brunette in an emerald evening gown, Mr. Harper announced his engagement to Camila Vaughn, daughter of prominent businesswoman Victoria Vaughn, at last Saturday's Metropolitan Museum Gala. The article continued, "The couple has been dating for 8 months and plans a spring wedding." Emily stared at the woman's face. Camila Vaughn was beautiful in that effortless way that came with good genes and better money. High cheekbones, perfect skin, the kind of smile that belonged on magazine covers. She looked genuinely happy, gazing up at William with obvious adoration. "Mom?" Emily spun around to find Isabelle standing behind her, backpack slung over one shoulder, her 14-year-old face creased with concern. "Izzy, what are you doing here?" "You should be home doing homework. Mrs. Rodriguez said she saw you come in here looking upset." Isabelle dropped into the chair next to her mother, her dark eyes, so much like Michael's, scanning the computer screen. "Who's that guy?" Emily's instinct was to minimize the browser, to protect her daughter from this impossible situation. But Isabelle had inherited more than just Michael's eyes. She'd gotten his stubborn streak and his ability to sense when adults were hiding something important. "His name is William Harper," Emily said carefully. "He came into the store today and I thought he looked familiar." Isabelle leaned closer to the screen, studying the photos with the intensity of someone solving a puzzle. "He's really rich, huh? Apparently. And he's getting married to this pretty lady." "Yes." Isabelle was quiet for a moment, scrolling through the images with the casual computer literacy of her generation. "Mom, can I ask you something weird?" Emily's chest tightened. "Of course." "Do you think Dad would look different now? I mean, if he hadn't died, would he look older? Maybe dress differently?" The question hit Emily like a sucker punch. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "I don't know. Sometimes I try to imagine what he'd be like now. Whether he'd still wear those terrible dad jeans you always made fun of. Or if he'd have gotten one of those fancy business suits." Isabelle paused, her finger hovering over the mouse. "This guy kind of has Dad's nose, don't you think?" Emily's hands trembled as she reached over to close the browser. "We should go home. You have that algebra test tomorrow." But Isabelle wasn't ready to let it go. "Mom, what's really going on? And don't say nothing, because you've been acting weird all day, Mrs. Rodriguez said you looked like you'd seen a ghost when you left work." The phrase made Emily flinch, out of the mouths of babes. "Sometimes," Emily said slowly, choosing her words carefully, "we see people who remind us of someone we've lost. It can be jarring. But this William guy doesn't just remind you of Dad, does he?" Isabelle's voice was gentle but insistent. "You think it's actually him?" Emily turned to face her daughter fully. At 14, Isabelle was no longer the 7-year-old who'd cried herself to sleep every night for months after Michael's death. She was smart, perceptive, and deserved more credit than Emily usually gave her. "The resemblance is uncanny," Emily admitted. "But your father is dead, Izzy. We both know that. We went to his funeral. But what if—" "No what ifs," Emily said firmly, standing up and gathering her purse. "Come on, let's go home." The walk to their modest apartment in Jamaica Plain was unusually quiet. Emily could practically hear the wheels turning in Isabelle's head, and she knew her daughter well enough to realize this conversation was far from over. Their second-floor walk-up felt smaller than usual when they entered, the walls seeming to close in with the weight of the day's revelations. Emily headed straight for the kitchen to start dinner, hoping the familiar routine would restore some normalcy to the evening. "Mom!" Isabelle appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding something in her hands. "I found this." Emily's heart stopped. In her daughter's hands was an old shoebox, one Emily thought she'd hidden well enough in the back of her bedroom closet. Inside, she knew, were the remnants of their life with Michael. Photos, letters, little mementos that had been too precious to throw away, but too painful to display. "Izzy, you shouldn't." "I was looking for those boots you borrowed last week," Isabelle said quickly. "I wasn't snooping, I swear. But then I found this, and I saw the video camera, and I thought—" She trailed off, holding up Michael's old digital camera. "I thought maybe there might be videos of Dad on here. Videos I've never seen." Emily sank into a kitchen chair, feeling suddenly exhausted. "Honey, I found one, Mom, from my 7th birthday party, right before Dad died. He's talking in it, joking around with Uncle Pete about something. And Mom, Isabelle's voice dropped to a whisper. He does this thing with his hands when he talks, like he's conducting an invisible orchestra. And today, when I was looking at those pictures of William Harper online, I saw a photo of him giving a speech at some business thing, and he was doing the exact same gesture. The room went very, very quiet. Emily could hear the upstairs neighbor's television, the distant sound of traffic on Center Street, the hum of their old refrigerator, but inside their little kitchen, the silence stretched like a held breath. "Show me," Emily said finally. Isabelle's face lit up with something between hope and fear. She connected the camera to Emily's laptop, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency until she found the file. The video filled the screen, and suddenly, Michael was alive again. Laughing as he filmed 7-year-old Isabelle blowing out her birthday candles, the camera shook slightly as he chuckled at something off-screen. And there it was, that distinctive gesture, his left hand moving in small, precise circles as he spoke. Like he was drawing his thoughts in the air, Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Because Isabelle was right. In every photo she'd seen of William Harper addressing a crowd or explaining something to reporters, his left hand moved in exactly the same way. Emily barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Michael's face superimposed over William Harper's features, heard that familiar rasp in a stranger's voice. By morning, she'd made a decision that felt both completely insane and utterly necessary. She was going to confront him again. The plan was simple. She'd take her lunch break early and walk the 4 blocks to Harper Industries' downtown offices. If William Harper was really some kind of imposter, he'd slip up eventually. And if he was Michael, somehow, impossibly, then she'd find a way to make him remember. "You're making a mistake," Grace said, when Emily told her about the plan. They were in the back room of Imperial Jewelers, ostensibly taking inventory but really having the conversation Emily had been dreading. "Grace, what aren't you telling me?" Emily set down the clipboard she'd been pretending to use and turned to face her friend. "Yesterday, when you saw him, you went white as a sheet. You know something." Grace's weathered hands fidgeted with the dust cloth she was holding. At 62, she'd seen enough of life to develop excellent instincts about when to speak and when to stay quiet. Right now, everything about her posture screamed caution. "Some stones are better left unturned, Mija," Grace said finally. "Trust me on this. I can't just pretend I didn't see him. Grace, that's my husband, the father of my child. If there's even a chance, there's no chance." Grace's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Michael Walker is dead, Emily. You need to accept that and move on." Something in her tone made Emily's skin crawl. This wasn't motherly concern or practical advice. This was fear. "You're scared," Emily said slowly. "You're actually scared of him. Why?" Grace turned away, busying herself with organizing already organized supplies. "I'm not scared of anyone. I just think you're setting yourself up for heartbreak, and I care about you too much to watch that happen." Emily studied her friend's profile, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she was avoiding eye contact. "I'm going to see him, Grace, with or without your blessing." The older woman's hands stilled on the shelves. "Then God help you both." Harper Industries occupied the top 15 floors of one of downtown Boston's most prestigious office buildings. Emily had walked past it countless times over the years, but she'd never really looked at it. Not the way she was looking now. Noting the security cameras, the uniformed guards, the general aura of wealth and power that seemed to emanate from the very glass and steel. The lobby was all marble and chrome, designed to intimidate. Emily felt woefully underdressed in her simple black dress and cardigan, but she forced herself to walk confidently to the reception desk. "I'd like to see William Harper," she told the impeccably groomed receptionist. "Do you have an appointment?" The woman's smile was polite but dismissive. "No, but it's personal. Tell him Emily Walker is here to see him." Something flickered across the receptionist's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. I'll check to see if Mr. Harper is available." Emily waited, her heart hammering as she watched the woman make a quiet phone call. Whatever conversation was happening, it involved a lot of glances in Emily's direction and several long pauses. "Mr. Harper will see you," the receptionist said finally, her professional mask firmly back in place. "Elevator bank C, 42nd floor. His assistant will meet you there." The elevator ride felt like it lasted forever. Emily caught her reflection in the polished doors and tried to prepare herself for whatever was about to happen. What did you say to someone who looked exactly like your dead husband but claimed to be a stranger? The 42nd floor was a study in understated luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Boston Harbor, and everything from the furniture to the artwork screamed money. Old money. The kind that didn't need to show off because it knew exactly what it was worth. Ms. Walker. A woman in her 30s approached with a measured smile. "I'm Sandra, Mr. Harper's assistant. He's just finishing a call, but he'll see you in a moment." Emily nodded, trying to look like she belonged in this rarefied air. Through the glass walls of the corner office, she could see William Harper pacing as he spoke on the phone. That familiar nervous energy that used to drive her crazy because Michael could never just sit still when he was thinking. "You can go in now," Sandra said, opening the office door. William Harper looked up as Emily entered, and for just a split second, she saw something in his eyes that looked like relief. Then the mask was back, polite, distant, professional. "Ms. Walker, I wasn't expecting to see you again. I need to talk to you," Emily said, proud that her voice came out steady. "About what happened yesterday." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Please, sit, though I'm not sure what more there is to discuss." "I think you mistook me for someone else." Emily remained standing. "You have a scar on your left shoulder from when you fell off your bike trying to impress Jenny Morrison in 3rd grade. You're allergic to shellfish, but you eat it anyway because you think shrimp scampi is worth the risk. You sing off-key in the shower, and your favorite song to butcher is Sweet Caroline because you think the ba-ba-ba part is hilarious." With each detail, William's face grew paler. His hand moved unconsciously to his left shoulder, then stopped as if he'd caught himself doing something he shouldn't. "When you're nervous, you touch your bottom lip," Emily continued, noting how his hand was doing exactly that right now. "You prefer your coffee black, but you'll add sugar if no one's looking. You have a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your right shoulder blade, and you used to joke that it was where an angel kissed you before you were born." "Stop." The word came out hoarse, barely a whisper. "Your daughter's name is Isabelle." Emily pressed on, stepping closer. "She was 7 when you supposedly died. She used to make you elaborate Father's Day cards with glitter and construction paper, and you kept every single one in a shoebox under our bed. She has your eyes, your stubborn streak, and your terrible habit of leaving dirty socks everywhere." "I said stop." William shot to his feet, his composure finally cracking. "I don't know who you are or what kind of game you're playing, but I don't have a daughter. I've never been married. I don't know anything about Father's Day cards or birthmarks or—" He stopped abruptly, his face contorting with something that looked like pain. His hand went to his temple, pressing hard as if he were fighting off a headache. "Michael," Emily said softly, reaching toward him. "It's okay. I'm here. We can figure this out. My name is William Harper," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I am William Harper. I am. For a moment, Emily thought he might break through whatever wall was blocking his memories. His eyes cleared slightly, focusing on her face with an intensity that reminded her so much of the way Michael used to look at her when he was trying to memorize every detail. Then the office door burst open. "Darling, there you are." A woman swept in like she owned the place. Which, Emily realized with a sinking heart, she probably did. Victoria Vaughn was everything the newspaper photos had suggested and more. Elegant, commanding, with the kind of presence that made everyone else in the room feel slightly smaller. Behind her came Camila, William's fiancée, looking genuinely concerned. "Will, Sandra said you had a visitor. Are you all right? You look pale." Victoria's sharp eyes took in the scene with obvious displeasure. "And you are?" she asked Emily, her tone suggesting that whatever the answer was, it wouldn't be satisfactory. "Emily Walker," Emily said, lifting her chin. "I was just leaving." "Yes," Victoria said, moving to stand possessively next to William. "I think that would be best." But Emily wasn't ready to give up. "Think about what I said. William, about the angel's kiss. You know what I'm talking about, even if you can't remember why." William's face was a mask of confusion and pain. Camila took his arm gently. "Will, what's she talking about?" "Nothing," he said quickly, but Emily caught the way his hand moved again to his shoulder. to the exact spot where she knew his birthmark would be. She's talking about nothing. As Emily walked toward the door, she heard Victoria's voice, low and urgent. We need to adjust your medication dosage. These episodes are becoming more frequent. Episodes. Medication. The words hit Emily like physical blows. She turned back, but Victoria was already ushering William toward a private door at the back of the office, Camila following with obvious concern. William, Emily called out desperately. Michael, please. He looked back at her one last time, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. For just an instant, the confusion was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like recognition, almost like love. Then Victoria's hand was on his arm, guiding him away, and the moment was lost. Emily stood alone in the luxurious office, her heart racing with a mixture of hope and terror, because now she knew the truth. Michael was alive. He was being drugged, and somehow Victoria Vaughn was at the center of it all. Emily's hands were still shaking when she returned to Imperial Jewelers. The confrontation at Harper Industries had confirmed her worst fears and deepest hopes simultaneously. Michael was alive, but something was terribly wrong. The way Victoria had mentioned adjusting his medication made Emily's blood run cold. You went to see him, didn't you? Grace's voice held no surprise, only resignation. Emily looked up from the inventory sheet she'd been staring at without seeing. Grace stood in the doorway of the back room, her usually kind face creased with worry, and something else. Something that looked almost like guilt. You knew, Emily said, the pieces suddenly clicking together in her mind. All this time, you knew he was alive. Grace's shoulders sagged as if she'd been carrying a heavy weight for too long. Close the shop, Mija. We need to talk. Emily's hands trembled as she flipped the sign to closed and locked the front door. When she turned around, Grace was sitting heavily in one of the customer chairs, looking every one of her 62 years. How long have you known? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Since the beginning, Grace said quietly. Since the day William Harper first appeared in the Boston Society pages 2 years ago. 2 years. The betrayal hit Emily like a physical blow. You've known for 2 years that my husband was alive, and you said nothing. It's not that simple. How is it not that simple? Emily's voice rose to near shouting. Grace, I mourned him. Isabelle and I grieved for years. We had nothing. And you knew he was alive and wealthy and drugged out of his mind by a woman who would kill us both without blinking if she thought we were a threat. Grace's words came out in a rush, silencing Emily's protests. You think I wanted to keep this from you? You think it was easy watching you struggle? Watching Isabelle ask why her daddy had to die when I knew he was alive? Emily sank into the chair across from Grace, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Tell me everything. Grace was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands twisting in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with years of buried secrets. I don't clean this place because I need the money, Grace began. I clean it because Victoria Vaughn pays me to watch you, to report on your activities, your emotional state, whether you're getting too close to the truth. The words hit Emily like ice water. You're a spy. I'm a prisoner, Grace corrected, her voice breaking. Victoria has my grandson, Miguel. He's 8 years old. Emily, she's had him for 3 years, and she's made it very clear what will happen to him if I don't do exactly what she says. Emily's mind reeled. Sweet, maternal Grace, who had always been there with a listening ear and homemade tamales when money was tight, was working for the woman who had destroyed Emily's life. Miguel was supposed to visit me during summer break, Grace continued, tears streaming down her face. His parents were going through a nasty divorce, and they thought it would be good for him to get away from all the fighting. He never made it to my house. Victoria's people intercepted him at the airport. One day, he was this happy little boy excited to spend the summer with his abuela, and the next, gone. Why? Emily managed to ask. Why would she do that? Because she needed insurance. She knew that sooner or later, Michael might remember something, or you might figure out the truth. She needed someone close to you, someone who could watch for signs that her carefully constructed world was falling apart. Emily thought about all the times Grace had seemed to know exactly when she was having a bad day, all the moments of unexpected kindness that she'd attributed to friendship. So everything between us has been a lie. No, Grace said fiercely. My care for you and Isabelle is real. My friendship is real. The lies were forced on me, Emily, every single day for 3 years. I've had to choose between protecting my grandson and helping the woman I've come to love like a daughter. Emily tried to process this revelation, but her mind kept circling back to the same impossible fact. Michael is alive. He's really alive. Yes, but he's not the man you married, Grace said gently. Victoria has turned him into someone else entirely. The medications she gives him don't just suppress his memories. They reshape his entire personality. The Michael you knew. The gentle man who used to help Isabelle with her homework and surprise you with wildflowers. He picked on his way home from work. That man is buried so deep that even Victoria isn't sure he can be recovered. But today, when I mentioned the birthmark, he reacted. There was recognition in his eyes. Grace nodded grimly, which means Victoria will increase his dosage. She can't afford to have him remember, especially not now. Why not now? Because in 6 months, William Harper is supposed to marry Camila Vaughn in what's being billed as Boston's wedding of the decade. Once they're married, Victoria will have complete legal control over the Harper fortune through her daughter. She'll finally have everything she's worked for. Emily's head was spinning with the implications. And Camila, does she know? Camila is as much a victim as Michael is, Grace said sadly. She genuinely loves the man she knows as William. She has no idea that her mother has built their entire relationship on lies and manipulation. Emily stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and staring out at the busy Boston street. Normal people were going about their normal lives, completely unaware that in this small jewelry store, a woman was learning that everything she thought she knew about the last 7 years was a carefully orchestrated deception. "We have to stop this," Emily said finally. "We can't," Grace said simply. "Victoria Vaughn is one of the most powerful women in Boston. She has connections in law enforcement, the medical community, the legal system, and she has my grandson. So we're just supposed to let this continue. Let Michael live as a drugged puppet while that woman profits from his identity." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small flip phone, the kind people used when they wanted to avoid being tracked. "There might be a way," she said slowly. "But it would be dangerous, for all of us." Emily's heart leaped. "What kind of way?" "Victoria keeps detailed records of everything. The medications, the identity transfer, the financial manipulations. She's paranoid about being betrayed, so she documents everything as insurance against her associates. If we could get our hands on those files." "Where does she keep them?" "In a private safe in her home office." "But Emily, you have to understand. Attempting this would be signing Miguel's death warrant, and yours, and Isabelle's." Emily closed her eyes, thinking of her daughter at home right now, probably doing homework at the kitchen table, completely unaware that her dead father was alive and imprisoned in his own mind just a few miles away. "What if we could find Miguel first?" Emily asked. "What if we could get him somewhere safe before we make our move?" Grace shook her head. "I've tried for 3 years to find him. Victoria has resources I can't compete with. Professional kidnappers, safe houses, people who specialize in making children disappear. But you must have some idea where he might be. I know he's alive. She sends me photos every few months to prove it. But they're always indoor shots. Nothing that would give away a location, for all I know. He could be anywhere in the country." Emily sank back into her chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her like a physical force. Michael was alive but lost to her. Grace was trapped by love for her grandson. Victoria Vaughn held all the cards. "There's something else," Grace said quietly. "Something I haven't told you." Emily looked up, not sure she could handle any more revelations. "The night before you first saw Michael at Harper Industries, Victoria called me. She knew he was coming to the store. She sent him here deliberately. Why would she do that? To test him. To see if being near you would trigger any memories. And to test me. To see if I would warn you or try to interfere." Grace's voice was heavy with guilt. "I failed both tests. I should have prepared you, but I was too afraid for Miguel. And when I saw the recognition in Michael's eyes when he looked at you, I panicked." "Grace," Emily reached across to take her friend's hand. "None of this is your fault, isn't it? I've been her accomplice for 3 years. I've watched you struggle to pay rent while your husband lived in a mansion. I've lied to your face every single day. Because your grandson's life depended on it. And now, Grace asked, what happens now that you know the truth? Emily was quiet for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. Finally, she looked up at Grace with determination in her eyes. Now, we find a way to save them both. The nightmares started that same evening. William Harper, the man who insisted he had never been anyone else, found himself jolting awake at 3 a.m., his silk pajamas soaked with sweat, fragments of dreams clinging to his consciousness like spider webs. A little girl with dark eyes, laughing as she rode piggyback through a modest kitchen, the scent of coffee and vanilla, a woman's voice singing softly, a melody that made his chest ache with inexplicable longing. He stumbled to his ensuite bathroom in the Beacon Hill mansion, splashing cold water on his face and staring at his reflection in the antique mirror. The face looking back at him was familiar. Strong jawline, green eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident he couldn't quite remember the details of. But tonight, something felt different. Wrong. Somehow. Your daughter's name is Isabelle. The woman's words from yesterday echoed in his mind. And with them came a flash of something that felt disturbingly like memory. Small hands covered in finger paint, a gap-toothed grin, the proud presentation of a Father's Day card made from construction paper and glitter. No, he whispered to his reflection. That's not real. That's not my life. But even as he said the words, his hand moved unconsciously to touch the crescent-shaped birthmark on his shoulder, the one the woman had described with impossible accuracy. Across town, Emily sat at her kitchen table with Isabelle. Surrounded by printouts, photographs, and pages of handwritten notes, what had started as a simple internet search had evolved into a full-scale investigation, with Isabelle proving surprisingly adept at finding information that Emily had missed. Look at this, Isabelle said, pointing to a society page photo from 18 months ago. This is from when William Harper first appeared at some charity thing. Look at his posture. Emily studied the image. William stood slightly apart from the other guests, his shoulders tense, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. There was something almost lost about him, like someone playing a role they didn't quite understand. And here, Isabelle continued, pulling up another photo on Emily's laptop. This is from last month. Same event. Basically the same pose. But look at the difference. In the more recent photo, William's bearing was completely different. Confident, commanding. Every inch the powerful businessman. But what caught Emily's attention was the woman standing slightly behind him, Victoria Vaughn, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She's always touching him, Emily murmured, scrolling through more images. In every photo where they appear together, she's making physical contact, a hand on his arm, standing close enough to whisper in his ear, like she's controlling him, Isabelle said quietly. Emily looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. At 14, Isabelle was developing an observational intelligence that was both impressive and slightly unsettling. Izzy, I need you to promise me something, Emily said, closing the laptop. You can't tell anyone about this. Not your friends, not teachers, not anyone. What we're dealing with here. It could be dangerous. Isabelle's eyes widened. Dangerous how? Emily hesitated. How much should she tell her daughter? How much was too much? There are powerful people involved, she said finally. People who have a lot to lose if the truth comes out. We need to be very, very careful. Isabelle nodded solemnly. But we're not giving up, right? We're going to help Dad. The simple faith in her daughter's voice nearly broke Emily's heart. We're going to try, sweetheart. But I need you to let me handle the dangerous parts, okay? Okay. Isabelle paused, then added, Mom, do you think he knows, somewhere deep down? Do you think Dad knows who he really is? Emily thought about the moment in William's office when he'd looked at her with that flash of recognition, the way his hand had moved to his birthmark without conscious thought. I think part of him does, she said. I think that's what scares Victoria Vaughn the most. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Emily was organizing the morning jewelry display when Grace approached with a manila envelope in her hands. This came for you, Grace said quietly, glancing around to make sure they were alone in the store. Emily took the envelope, noting that it had no return address, and her name was written in block letters that looked deliberately disguised. Inside was a single photograph and a typed note, The photograph showed a young boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sitting at a small desk in what appeared to be a classroom. He was focused on a worksheet, his dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that reminded Emily painfully of Isabelle at that age. But what made her breath catch was the look of profound sadness in his eyes. Even in profile, the note was brief. Miguel is well cared for and receives excellent education. This arrangement continues as long as all parties remember their obligations. Any deviation from established protocols will result in immediate relocation to less comfortable accommodations. Grace's hands were shaking as she looked at the photo. She sends these every few months, she whispered, just to remind me what's at stake. Emily studied the image more carefully. The classroom looked expensive. Polished wood, quality educational materials, the kind of private tutoring that cost serious money, but there were no windows visible, no clues about location. Grace, Emily said slowly. Look at the worksheet he's working on. Grace leaned closer. The paper was angled just enough that they could see it was a math problem involving currency conversion. Dollars to euros to pounds. International finance, Emily murmured. That's pretty advanced for an 8-year-old. Miguel was always good with numbers, Grace said proudly, then caught herself. But you're right, this is college-level stuff. Emily felt a spark of hope. What if it's not just busy work? What if they're training him for something specific? Like what? I don't know yet, but Victoria Vaughn doesn't do anything without a reason. If she's keeping Miguel in some kind of elite educational facility instead of just hiding him somewhere, there's a purpose. Grace looked at her with desperate hope. You think we might be able to find him? I think we need to start thinking like Victoria thinks. She's not just holding Miguel to control you. She's investing in him. The question is, for what? Their conversation was interrupted by the door chimes. Emily looked up to see Camila Vaughn entering the store, looking elegant but troubled in a navy wool coat and pearl earrings. Miss Walker. Camila approached the counter with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she'd been debating this visit for a while. I hope you don't mind me coming here. I got your name from the visitor log at Harper Industries. Emily's heart began to race. Of course. How can I help you? It's about William, Camila said, glancing around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. Something's been wrong with him since your visit yesterday. He's been having terrible headaches, and he keeps asking strange questions. What kind of questions? About his childhood. Mostly things he should know, but doesn't seem to remember clearly. And he's been asking about a song. Something about Caroline and ba ba ba. Camila looked confused. Does that mean anything to you? Emily's pulse quickened. Sweet Caroline had been Michael's go-to shower song, the one he'd sing off-key while butchering the Boston Red Sox anthem. It was one of the details she'd mentioned during their confrontation. I might have mentioned something about it when we spoke, Emily said carefully. My mother thinks he's having some kind of breakdown, Camila continued. She wants to increase his medication, maybe have him hospitalized for observation, but I'm worried that's not what he needs. Emily exchanged a quick glance with Grace. This was either a trap or an unexpected opportunity. What do you think he needs? Emily asked. Camila was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with something. Honestly, I think he needs answers. Real answers. Not the vague explanations my mother gives about stress and business pressures. She looked directly at Emily. Yesterday, when you were talking to him, I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Recognition, maybe. Or relief. Camila, Emily said gently. What exactly do you know about William's past? Not much, which is part of the problem. Mother says his father kept him abroad for most of his childhood, that he was educated privately in Europe. But William can't remember specifics about any of it. No favorite teachers, no childhood friends, no stories about growing up. It's like his life started when he came to Boston 2 years ago. Emily's mind raced. Here was Victoria's own daughter, expressing doubts about the very story Victoria had constructed. This could be the break they needed, or it could be the most dangerous trap yet. Camila, Emily said carefully, if I told you I had information about William's real past, would you want to hear it? The younger woman's eyes widened. You know something, don't you? Something my mother doesn't want me to know. Before Emily could respond, Grace stepped forward. Miss Vaughn, some truths are dangerous to know. More dangerous than living a lie, Camila asked. more dangerous than marrying a man who might not even know who he really is. Emily made a decision that felt both reckless and inevitable. Meet me tonight, somewhere private, away from your mother's influence. And Camila, don't tell anyone about this conversation. Anyone. The coffee shop Camila had chosen was in Cambridge, far enough from Beacon Hill's prying eyes to ensure privacy. Emily arrived first, claiming a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. Her hands trembled slightly as she nursed her coffee. The manila folder beside her containing printouts, photos, and documents that could either save Michael or destroy them all. At exactly 7 p.m., Camila entered, scanning the room nervously before spotting Emily. She looked younger somehow, stripped of the polished confidence that came with the Vaughn name. Her designer coat and expensive handbag seemed like costume pieces, protection against a world that suddenly felt less certain. "Thank you for meeting me," Camila said, sliding into the booth across from Emily. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," Emily admitted. "What I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything." Camila's hands wrapped around her coffee cup like an anchor. "My whole life, my mother has told me that knowledge is power, but lately, I'm starting to think some knowledge is just painful." Emily studied the young woman across from her. Camila Vaughn had been raised in privilege, shaped by Victoria's ambitions, groomed to be the perfect daughter of Boston's elite. But there was something genuine in her eyes, a capacity for empathy that her mother's machinations hadn't managed to corrupt. "Before I tell you anything," Emily said, "I need to know, how much do you really love William?" Camila's cheeks flushed. "That's a strange question. It's the most important question, because if you love him, really love him, then you'll want to know the truth about who he is, even if it destroys the life you've built together." "I love him," Camila said without hesitation, "more than I've ever loved anyone. But lately, I feel like I'm in love with a ghost. There are these moments when he looks at me, and I can see he's somewhere else entirely, remembering something he can't quite grasp." Emily opened the folder and pulled out a photograph, one of the few wedding pictures she still had. It showed her and Michael dancing at their reception, both of them laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. They looked impossibly young and happy. "His name isn't William Harper," Emily said quietly. "It's Michael Walker, and 7 years ago he was my husband." Camila stared at the photograph, her face going pale, even in the coffee shop's dim lighting. The resemblance was undeniable. The man in the photo was younger, his hair a bit longer, his style completely different, but it was unmistakably the same face. That's impossible," Camila whispered. "William is William Harper. His father was William Harper Sr., the financier. He inherited the company." "No," Emily said gently. "Your mother created that identity. The real William Harper Jr. died in childhood. I found the death certificate. Your mother needed a legitimate heir to claim the Harper fortune, so she manufactured one." Emily spread more documents across the table. Death certificates, medical records, financial transfers. Each piece of paper was another nail in the coffin of Camila's carefully constructed world. "Michael Walker died in a car accident 7 years ago," Emily continued. "At least, that's what everyone was told. But he didn't die. Someone, your mother, had him pulled from the wreckage and taken to a private medical facility. When he recovered, his memories were altered. Altered how? Drugs, therapy, psychological manipulation. Everything that made him Michael Walker was systematically erased and replaced with the William Harper identity." Emily pulled out medical records Grace had helped her obtain through her network of cleaning contacts at various Boston hospitals. "These show regular treatments at a private clinic your mother owns. Treatments designed to suppress memory and personality." Camila's hands shook as she examined the documents. "These dates, they correspond with William's business trips. Mother always said he needed regular checkups because of a weak constitution from his European childhood. There was no European childhood. Michael grew up in Southie, went to community college, worked as an electrician before starting his own small business. He was nothing like the man your mother turned him into." "But why?" Camila's voice cracked. "Why would she do something so monstrous?" Emily hesitated. This was the part that would hurt Camila the most, because she needed to control the Harper fortune, and she couldn't do that as William Sr.'s secret mistress. But as the mother-in-law of his heir, she'd have access to everything. She never mentioned knowing William's father personally. They had an affair for 15 years. Your mother was planning to forge his will to inherit everything. But then she discovered that William Sr. had an illegitimate son, someone with a better legal claim to the fortune than any forged document could provide. Emily watched as the implications sank in. Camila's entire engagement, her future marriage, her mother's carefully orchestrated rise to power, all of it built on the systematic destruction of another man's identity. "The man I love doesn't exist," Camila said finally, her voice hollow. "He exists," Emily said firmly. "He's buried under layers of drugs and false memories. But Michael is still in there yesterday, when I mentioned specific details about his past. He reacted. Part of him remembers." Camila was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the wedding photo. "How can you be sure? How do you know it's really him, and not just someone who looks similar?" Emily reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, navigating to the video Isabelle had found. "This was taken at my daughter's 7th birthday party. A week before the accident?" She turned the phone so Camila could see the screen. Michael's voice filled the small space between them as he laughed and joked with friends, his hands moving in those distinctive circular gestures as he explained something off camera. Camila's intake of breath was sharp and immediate. "That gesture, William does that exact same thing when he's giving presentations. I always thought it was charming, but I never knew why. Because it's who he really is," Emily said. "The essence of Michael Walker that your mother couldn't completely erase." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of revelation settling between them like a physical presence. Other coffee shop patrons continued their conversations, completely unaware that in their corner booth, a woman's entire world was crumbling and rebuilding simultaneously. "What do you want from me?" Camila asked finally. "I want your help," Emily said. "Your mother has my husband trapped in a false identity, and she's holding an innocent child hostage to ensure compliance from the one person who might be able to help him." "What child?" Emily explained about Grace's grandson, about the photographs and threats, about the elaborate web of control Victoria had constructed to protect her stolen empire. "I need to get into your mother's private office," Emily continued. "Grace says she keeps detailed records of everything, the medical treatments, the identity transfer, the financial manipulations. If we can get those files, we can prove what she's done." Camila shook her head immediately. "That's impossible. Mother's office is in the private wing of our house. It's protected by security systems. Cameras, locks that would take a professional to bypass. You could get me in." "Emily, no. You don't understand what my mother is capable of if she found out I was helping you. She's already committed kidnapping, identity theft, fraud, and probably murder," Emily said bluntly. "What's one more crime to someone like that?" Camila flinched as if she'd been slapped. "She's still my mother, and Michael is still my husband, and Grace's grandson is still an innocent child being held prisoner." Emily reached across the table to take Camila's hand. "I'm not asking you to destroy your mother. I'm asking you to help save the people she's hurt. If I help you and we're caught, then we'll face the consequences together. But if we do nothing, Michael stays trapped forever. Miguel remains a hostage, and your mother continues to profit from stolen identity and kidnapped children." Camila pulled her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold. "I need time to think." "We don't have time," Emily said urgently. "Grace said your mother is planning to increase Michael's medication because of his recent memory flashes. If she does that, we might lose him completely." "How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't some elaborate con to get access to my family's money?" Emily had expected this question. She pulled out her phone again, this time showing Camila a photo of Isabelle from last Christmas, a gangly 14-year-old with Michael's green eyes and stubborn chin. "This is my daughter, Isabelle. She's never known her father as anything but a memory and a few home videos. She doesn't know he's alive, doesn't know he's wealthy, doesn't know anything except that she misses the daddy who used to read her stories and help her with homework." Emily's voice broke slightly. "I'm not after money, Camila. I just want my family back." Camila stared at the photo for a long time. When she finally looked up, there was a new resolve in her eyes. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Grace's hands trembled as she measured out William's evening medication at the Vaughn Mansion's private medical suite. For 3 years, she'd performed this task with mechanical precision, crushing the memory, suppressing pills into his nightly tea, exactly as Victoria had instructed. Tonight, however, the routine felt different. Tonight, she was committing an act of rebellion that could cost her grandson his life. Instead of the full dosage, Grace used only half the prescribed amount, carefully disposing of the remaining powder in the bathroom sink. It wasn't enough to restore Michael's memories immediately, but it might be enough to crack the pharmaceutical prison that held his true identity captive. "Grace?" Victoria's voice from the doorway made her jump. "Is everything prepared for tonight?" "Yes, ma'am," Grace replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "Mr. Williams' tea is ready, and I've laid out his formal wear for the charity gala." Victoria moved closer, her sharp eyes scanning the medical tray with the intensity of a hawk watching for prey. "You seem nervous tonight." "Just tired, ma'am. It's been a long day." "Indeed it has." Victoria picked up the teacup, inhaling the subtle vanilla scent that masked the medication's bitter taste. "You know how important tonight is, don't you, Grace? The Pemberton Foundation Gala is where Boston's most influential families gather. William needs to be at his absolute best." Grace nodded, fighting the urge to look away. "Of course, ma'am." "Good." Victoria's smile was as cold as winter frost. "Because any irregularities in his behavior tonight would be very unfortunate for everyone involved." The threat hung in the air like poisonous smoke. Grace waited until Victoria's footsteps faded down the hallway before allowing herself to breathe normally again. In a few hours, Emily would be putting the most dangerous plan of her life into motion, and Grace had just lit the fuse. Meanwhile, across town, Emily stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the borrowed black evening gown that Grace had somehow procured for her. The dress fit perfectly, too perfectly. Considering Grace's limited resources, Emily tried not to think about how Victoria's money might have paid for the very outfit she was wearing to infiltrate Victoria's world. "Mom, you look beautiful," Isabelle said from the doorway, but her voice carried worry beneath the compliment. "Are you sure about this?" Emily turned to face her daughter, noting how much older Isabelle looked in the lamplight. 14 years old, but her eyes held the gravity of someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "I'm sure," Emily lied, because the truth, that she was terrified and had no idea if this plan would work, wasn't something her daughter needed to hear. What if something goes wrong? What if this Victoria woman figures out who you are? Emily sat on the bed and pulled Isabelle down beside her. "Then we'll deal with it. But Izzy, I need you to understand something. Your father is alive, but he's trapped. If we don't try to help him now, we might lose him forever." Isabelle nodded solemnly. "I know. I don't want to lose you too." The words broke Emily's heart. Isabelle had already lost one parent. The fear of losing another was written across her young face like a neon sign. "You won't lose me," Emily promised, though she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. "No matter what happens tonight, I will come home to you." They held each other for a moment, mother and daughter clinging to certainty in an uncertain world. Then Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Camila. "Ready when you are." The Pemberton Foundation Gala was everything Emily had expected and more. The Fairmont Copley Plaza's grand ballroom had been transformed into a glittering showcase of Boston's elite, with crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The guest list read like a who's who of New England society. Politicians, business leaders, cultural luminaries, all gathered to celebrate charitable giving while networking their way to greater wealth and influence. Emily felt completely out of place and invisible at the same time, which was exactly what she'd hoped for. The key to infiltrating high society events, Camila had explained, was to look like you belonged while being forgettable enough that security wouldn't look twice. She spotted Camila near the silent auction tables, elegant in midnight blue silk that complemented her dark hair perfectly. But it was the man standing beside her that made Emily's breath catch in her throat. William Harper, Michael, looked magnificent in his black tuxedo, every inch the successful businessman. But there was something different about him tonight, a subtle tension in his posture that suggested the pharmaceutical chains binding his memories might be loosening slightly. Emily circulated through the crowd, nursing a glass of champagne and listening to conversations about yacht races and summer homes while keeping one eye on her target. Victoria Vaughn held court near the main stage, resplendent in crimson silk that matched her lipstick. surrounded by admirers who hung on her every word. The plan was simple in theory. While Victoria was distracted by her social obligations, Camila would create a reason for William to step outside. Emily would follow, and in the private garden space, she would attempt to break through his pharmaceutical haze using the one tool that had shown promise before: personal memories that his drugged mind couldn't completely suppress. At exactly 9:30, Camila excused herself from a conversation with the museum board and approached William. Emily watched from across the room as they had what appeared to be a brief, intense conversation. William frowned, pressing his hand to his temple in that gesture of confusion Emily was learning to recognize. Then he nodded and followed Camila toward the ballroom's side exit. Emily waited 60 seconds before following, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hotel's private garden was designed for quiet conversations and romantic interludes, with strategically placed benches and soft lighting that created intimate spaces among the carefully manicured landscaping. She found them near a fountain at the garden center. Camila was speaking in low, urgent tones, while William sat heavily on a marble bench, his head in his hands. "The headaches are getting worse," he was saying as Emily approached from the shadows. "And the dreams, Camila? I keep having these dreams about places I've never been, people I've never met. Maybe they're not dreams," Camila said gently. "Maybe they're memories. That's impossible. I know my own life. Do you?" Emily stepped into the circle of lamplight, and both William and Camila turned toward her. "Do you really know your life, Michael?" William's head snapped up, his green eyes focusing on her with an intensity that hadn't been there during their previous encounters. "You," he whispered. "You're the woman from the jewelry store." "I'm the woman who loves you," Emily said simply. "I'm the woman who's been grieving you for 7 years while you've been living as someone else." This time, William didn't immediately deny her words. Instead, he studied her face with the concentration of someone trying to solve a difficult puzzle. "The song," he said suddenly. "In my dreams, there's always this song, something about Caroline and bah, bah, bah," Emily finished. "You used to sing it in the shower every morning, completely off-key, but you didn't care because it made you happy." William's face contorted with something that looked like physical pain. "Stop, these aren't my memories." "They are your memories," Emily insisted, moving closer. "You just can't access them because of the drugs Victoria's been giving you." "Drugs?" William looked at Camila in confusion. "What is she talking about?" Camila's face was pale but determined. "Will, my mother has been medicating you. The tea you drink every night. The supplements she insists you take. They're not vitamins. They're memory suppressants. That's insane." But even as William said the words, Emily could see doubt creeping into his eyes. "Victoria cares about me. She's helping me manage my health issues." "What health issues?" Emily challenged. Michael Walker was perfectly healthy. He ran marathons, played weekend basketball with friends, chased his daughter around the playground until she begged him to stop. "I don't have a daughter. You have a daughter named Isabelle. She's 14 now, brilliant and stubborn and beautiful, and she has your eyes and your smile." Emily pulled out her phone, showing him the Christmas photo again. "This is Izzy last December. Look at her, Michael. Really look at her." William stared at the screen, and Emily watched as something shifted in his expression. The pharmaceutical fog seemed to clear slightly, replaced by something that looked almost like recognition. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She's yours," Emily whispered. "She's ours." For a moment, the three of them stood frozen in tableau, Emily holding her breath, Camila watching with tears in her eyes, William staring at a photo of the daughter he'd been programmed to forget. Then William gasped, his hands flying to his head as if he'd been struck by lightning. Images flashed through his mind like a broken film reel. A small apartment filled with laughter, a woman with gentle hands and worried eyes, a little girl in pigtails demanding one more bedtime story. "Emily," he whispered, and the name came out like a prayer. "Emily, what happened to me?" Before she could answer, the sound of footsteps on gravel made them all turn. Victoria Vaughn emerged from the garden path, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who looked distinctly uncomfortable in the formal setting. "Well," Victoria said, her voice carrying the deadly calm of a predator who'd cornered her prey, "this is quite the touching family reunion." The garden fell silent, except for the gentle splash of the fountain. Victoria Vaughn stood like an avenging angel in her crimson gown, her perfectly composed features betraying nothing of the fury that Emily could sense radiating from her like heat from a forge. "Mother," Camila said, her voice barely steady, "we were just getting some air." "Were you?" Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "How fascinating, because from where I stood, it looked like you were having quite an intimate conversation with Miss Walker here." William's head jerked up at Emily's surname, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "Walker?" he repeated, testing the name on his tongue like a half-remembered song. "Emily Walker." "Yes, darling," Victoria said, moving closer with predatory grace. "Emily Walker, the disturbed woman who's been stalking you, claiming to be your dead wife." "Dead wife?" William's confusion was palpable. "But I've never been married." Emily's heart clenched as she watched the pharmaceutical fog reassert itself, Michael's brief moment of clarity fading like morning mist. Victoria's influence was stronger than she'd anticipated. "Of course you haven't," Victoria continued smoothly. "You would remember something as significant as a marriage, wouldn't you? Just as you would remember a child if you'd ever had one. But something was different this time. Instead of the blank acceptance Emily had seen before, William was fighting against the mental barriers. His hands pressed to his temples as if trying to push through a wall of static. "The headaches," he muttered. "They're getting worse, which is why we need to get you home and adjust your medication," Victoria said, signaling to her security team. "Mrs. Walker, you're trespassing at a private event. I'm sure hotel security would be very interested to know how you obtained an invitation." Emily's mind raced. This was spiraling out of control faster than she'd anticipated, but before she could respond, Camila stepped forward. "She's my guest," Camila announced, her voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone, including herself. "I invited Emily Walker to join me tonight." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold fury beneath. "Camila, darling, you clearly don't understand the situation." "I understand it perfectly," Camila said, though Emily could see her hands trembling. "I understand that you've been lying to me my entire life." The two security guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for a family drama in the middle of what should have been a simple escort situation. "We'll discuss this at home," Victoria said sharply. "William, come along. You need your medication." But William wasn't moving. He was staring at Emily with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the pharmaceutical haze. And Emily realized this might be her only chance. "Your first apartment," she said quickly, stepping closer despite the security guards. It was above Murphy's Deli in Southie. The radiator clanked all night, and the neighbor's dog barked at exactly 5 a.m. every morning. "You said it was like living in a broken clock." William's face contorted with pain, but also something else. Recognition. "The bathroom faucet dripped," Emily continued, her voice gaining strength. "You kept saying you'd fix it, but you never did because secretly you liked the sound. You said it was like a metronome helping you think." "Stop," Victoria commanded, but Emily was beyond caring about consequences now. "You proposed to me in that apartment," Emily pressed on, "on a Tuesday night in February when the heat wasn't working and we were both wearing 3 layers of clothes. You got down on one knee in front of the space heater and said you didn't have a ring yet, but you had a lifetime of love to offer." William made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. The pharmaceutical walls in his mind were cracking, and memories were bleeding through like water through a broken dam. "You bought the ring 3 weeks later," Emily continued, tears streaming down her face. "A simple solitaire from a pawn shop in Davis Square. You apologized for it not being fancier, and I told you it was perfect because it came from you." "I remember," William whispered, and his voice held wonder and terror in equal measure. "God help me, I remember." Victoria's composure finally shattered. "Shut her up," she snapped at her security team. "Now." But before either man could move, William was on his feet, positioning himself between Emily and the guards with protective instincts that 7 years of programming couldn't suppress. "Don't touch her," he said, and his voice carried an authority that made everyone freeze. "Don't you dare touch her." "William, you're confused," Victoria said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "The medication withdrawal is causing hallucinations. These aren't real memories." "Then explain this," Camila said suddenly, pulling out her phone. She'd been recording the conversation, and now she played back William's voice. I remember. God help me. I remember. Explain the recognition in his voice, Camila continued. Explain why he's protecting a woman he supposedly never met. Victoria's eyes darted between her daughter, William, and Emily, calculating odds and escape routes like a cornered animal. Camila, you don't understand what you're dealing with. This woman is dangerous. No, Emily said quietly. You're dangerous. You kidnapped my husband, stole his identity, erased his memories, and held an innocent child hostage to cover your crimes. What child? Camila asked sharply. Emily had gone too far to stop now. Grace's grandson, Miguel. Your mother has been holding him for 3 years to ensure Grace's cooperation. Camila's face went white. Mother, that's not true. Tell me that's not true. Victoria's silence was answer enough. Miguel Hernandez, Emily continued, 8 years old. Your mother had him kidnapped from Logan Airport 3 years ago and has been using him as leverage ever since. My God, Camila breathed. Mother, you said Grace's grandson was living with relatives in California. You said, I said what was necessary, Victoria snapped, her composure completely gone now. Do you think building an empire is accomplished through gentle means? Do you think your comfortable life was paid for with clean money? The naked admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even the security guards looked uncomfortable now, clearly questioning what they'd gotten themselves into. 7 years, William said suddenly, his voice heavy with dawning horror. 7 years I've been living as someone else while my wife and daughter believed I was dead. You would have died anyway, Victoria said coldly. The car accident should have killed you. I gave you a better life than anything Michael Walker could have achieved. You gave me nothing. William, Michael, replied with quiet fury. You stole everything. My identity, my family, my choice. He turned to Emily, and in his eyes she saw the man she'd married, the father Isabelle had lost. How long have you known? 3 days, Emily whispered. 3 days since you walked into Imperial Jewelers and didn't recognize me, and you've been trying to save me ever since. It wasn't a question, but Emily nodded anyway. Michael turned back to Victoria, and when he spoke, his voice carried the cold precision of someone who'd spent 2 years learning to be a ruthless businessman. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to tell us where Miguel Hernandez is being held. You're going to arrange for his immediate release, and then you're going to turn yourself into the authorities. Victoria laughed. A sound like breaking glass. Or what? You'll go to the police with your recovered memories. Who's going to believe such an outlandish story? We will, said a new voice from the garden entrance. Everyone turned to see Grace approaching with a man in a dark suit, but not one of Victoria's security team. This man had the purposeful stride and observant eyes of law enforcement. Detective Martinez, Boston Police, the man said, showing his badge. We've been investigating reports of identity theft and child abduction, and thanks to Mrs. Martinez here, we now have enough evidence to make an arrest. Grace stepped forward, pulling a small recording device from her purse. I've been documenting everything for 3 years, she said quietly. Every conversation, every threat, every detail about Miguel's captivity. I was waiting for the right moment, and when Emily told me about tonight's plan, I knew it was time. Victoria's face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, fury, calculation, and finally, a cold acceptance of defeat. You have no idea what you've done, she said to Grace, or what's going to happen to your precious grandson now. Actually, we do, Detective Martinez said, pulling out handcuffs. Miguel Hernandez was recovered 3 hours ago from a private facility in New Hampshire. He's safe, healthy, and currently being reunited with his parents. The words hit the garden like a thunderclap. Grace's knees buckled, and Emily caught her as she sobbed with 3 years' worth of relief. Victoria Vaughn, the woman who had built an empire on lies and manipulation, who had stolen identities and destroyed families, finally had nothing left to say. The arrest of Victoria Vaughn made headlines across New England, but for Emily, the real story was unfolding in the quiet moments, watching Michael rediscover who he used to be, one memory at a time. The detoxification process was brutal. 3 days after Victoria's arrest, Michael sat in the guest bedroom of Emily's modest Jamaica Plain apartment, his hands shaking as his body fought against 7 years of pharmaceutical dependency. Dr. Sarah Chen, the neurologist detective Martinez had recommended, had warned them that memory recovery would be gradual and potentially incomplete. Some neural pathways may have been permanently altered, Dr. Chen had explained during their first consultation. The drugs Victoria used were sophisticated, designed not just to suppress memories but to create new neural patterns. Recovery will require patience. Emily sat beside Michael now, holding a cold compress to his forehead as another wave of withdrawal symptoms hit him. His face was pale, drawn with the effort of fighting through the chemical fog that had defined his existence for so long. "Tell me about Isabelle again," he said weakly. It had become a ritual, Emily sharing memories while his brain slowly rebuilt the connections that Victoria had severed. "She was 3 when she first tried to braid your hair," Emily said softly. "You sat perfectly still for 45 minutes while she tied knots that took me an hour to untangle. When I asked why you didn't stop her, you said you'd never had anyone want to style his hair before." A ghost of a smile crossed Michael's features. I can almost see her. Little hands, very serious expression, tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth when she concentrated. "Yes," Michael breathed, and Emily's heart leaped. Another connection made. Another piece of their life together returned. The bedroom door opened quietly, and Isabelle peered in. Over the past 3 days, she'd been cautious around this man who was her father, but also a stranger, understanding intellectually that Michael and William were the same person, while struggling emotionally with the disconnect between memory and reality. "How are you feeling?" Isabelle asked, hovering in the doorway. "Better," Michael replied, though his voice was still hoarse from the medication withdrawal. Would you sit with us for a while?" Isabelle glanced at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, their daughter crossed the room and perched on the edge of the bed, maintaining careful distance while clearly wanting to be closer. "I brought something," Isabelle said, pulling out a small photo album. "Mom thought you might want to see these." The album contained pictures from Isabelle's childhood, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays, ordinary moments that had seemed unremarkable when they were happening, but now felt precious beyond measure. Michael's hands trembled as he turned the pages, studying each image with desperate intensity. "This one," he said suddenly, pointing to a picture of 4-year-old Isabelle on his shoulders at the zoo. "I remember this day. You wanted to see the elephants, but the line was too long. So I lifted you up so you could see over everyone else's heads." Isabelle's eyes filled with tears. "You bought me a stuffed elephant in the gift shop. I named him Peanuts." "Peanuts," Michael repeated, and Emily could see him grasping for the memory, pulling it from the pharmaceutical haze. "You carried him everywhere for months. Your mother had to wash him almost daily because you wouldn't sleep without him." "I still have him," Isabelle whispered. "He's on my bookshelf." For the first time since Victoria's arrest, Michael reached out to touch his daughter's hand. The gesture was tentative, uncertain, but Isabelle didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," Michael said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. I know you don't remember me very well, and I know this is confusing." "I do remember you," Isabelle interrupted. "Maybe not everything, but I remember feeling safe when you were around. I remember you reading me stories with different voices for all the characters. I remember you teaching me to ride my bike in the park, running behind me even after I didn't need you to anymore." Michael's composure finally cracked. 7 years of stolen time, of missing birthdays and lost bedtime stories and moments that could never be recovered, hit him all at once. He buried his face in his hands and wept. For the daughter who'd grown up without him, for the wife who'd grieved him, for the life that had been stolen and could never be fully restored. Emily wrapped her arms around him while Isabelle, after a moment's hesitation, moved closer and placed her hand on his shoulder. They sat together in their small bedroom, a family learning how to be a family again. 3 weeks later, the legal complexities were still being untangled. Victoria's arrest had triggered investigations into dozens of financial institutions, medical facilities, and business partnerships. The Harper Industries empire was in chaos, with Michael's legal identity still technically that of William Harper, though his true memories were slowly returning. Camila had been cleared of any wrongdoing. Investigators determined that she'd been as much a victim of her mother's manipulation as Michael himself. But the revelation of her mother's crimes had shattered her sense of reality. She'd moved into a small apartment in Cambridge, donating most of her inheritance to organizations that helped missing children and victims of identity theft. "I keep thinking I should have known," Camila said during one of her visits to Emily's apartment. She'd become an unexpected friend, bonded to Emily by their shared experience of loving someone who'd been systematically erased. There were so many signs that something wasn't right, but I explained them away because I trusted her. "She was your mother," Emily replied gently. "Children are supposed to trust their parents." They were sitting in Emily's small kitchen while Michael napped and Isabelle did homework. Recovery was an exhausting process, and Michael still slept 12 to 14 hours a day as his brain rewired itself. "Have you decided what you're going to do about the Harper money?" Camila asked. It was a question that had been weighing on Emily's mind. Legally, Michael was entitled to the entire Harper fortune. Victoria's manipulation had been thorough enough that all the documentation supported his claim as William Harper Sr.'s legitimate heir. But the money felt tainted, built on lies and suffering. "We've talked about it," Emily said. "Michael wants to liquidate most of it, set up a foundation for missing children, fund research into memory recovery, maybe keep enough to ensure Isabelle can go to college without student loans." "That sounds like something the Michael you've described would do," Camila said with a sad smile. "The man I fell in love with never would have kept money that wasn't rightfully his." It was difficult territory. Camila's grief for the relationship that had never been real. Her genuine love for a man who'd been essentially a manufactured personality. Emily ached for her, understanding better than anyone the pain of loving someone who'd been stolen from themselves. "You could start over," Emily offered. "Travel, find yourself away from all this." "Maybe," Camila said. "Right now, I'm just trying to figure out who I am when I'm not Victoria Vaughn's daughter or William Harper's fiancée." A noise from the bedroom interrupted their conversation. Michael was awake and moving around. Over the past week, his periods of alertness had been growing longer, his memories more vivid and complete. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair disheveled from sleep, but his eyes clearer than Emily had seen them since his return. "Good morning," he said, and Emily's heart did a little flip at how normal the words sounded. "Afternoon, actually," she corrected gently. "How are you feeling?" "Different," Michael said, settling into the chair beside her. "Clearer, like someone turned up the contrast on everything." He looked at Camila with genuine warmth. "How are you holding up?" "Taking it one day at a time," Camila replied. "Like all of us." Michael nodded, then turned to Emily with an expression that was both hopeful and nervous. "I was thinking, when I'm stronger, when the doctors clear me, maybe we could take a trip, just the three of us, somewhere we've never been before, so we can make new memories alongside recovering the old ones." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "I'd like that." "Where would we go?" Isabelle asked, appearing from the living room with her math homework. "Anywhere you want," Michael said, and Emily could see him mentally calculating the endless possibilities that came with recovered wealth and recovered family. "We have a lot of time to make up for." "The Grand Canyon," Isabelle said immediately. "I've always wanted to see it." "Then that's where we'll go," Michael promised. And Emily believed him, because this was Michael Walker speaking, not the pharmaceutical ghost Victoria had created, but the man she'd married, the father Isabelle deserved. The person who kept his promises no matter how long it took. They still had a long road ahead of them. Legal battles, continued medical treatment, the slow work of rebuilding trust and intimacy that had been fractured by 7 years of separation. But for the first time since Michael had walked into Imperial Jewelers and failed to recognize her, Emily felt genuinely hopeful about their future. 3 years later, the morning sun streamed through the large windows of Crystal Memories, casting rainbow prisms across the handcrafted jewelry displays. Emily adjusted the delicate silver necklace she'd finished the night before, a custom piece for a young couple celebrating their first anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd become an artist of precious metals and stones, creating symbols of love and commitment in a shop that had become the foundation of their rebuilt life. "Mom, the Hendersons are here for their wedding rings," Isabelle called from the front counter. At 17, she'd grown into a confident young woman who split her time between helping at the shop and preparing for her senior year of high school. She'd inherited Michael's eye for detail and Emily's patience with customers, making her invaluable to the business they'd built together. Emily smiled, watching through the workshop doorway as Isabelle chatted easily with the customers. The shy 14-year-old who'd once struggled to connect with her returned father had blossomed into someone who moved through the world with quiet confidence. "I'll be right there," Emily called back, setting aside her tools and washing the silver polish from her hands. Custom wedding rings were her specialty now, each pair unique, each one telling a story of love that had overcome obstacles. The Hendersons were a young couple from the college town where they'd relocated after leaving Boston. Crystal Memories sat on Main Street in Westford, Massachusetts, a place small enough that everyone knew their story, but respectful enough not to constantly bring up the past. They'd chosen this town specifically because it offered something Boston never could: the chance to be ordinary again. "Mrs. Walker," Sarah Henderson said excitedly as Emily emerged from the workshop. "Are they ready?" Emily retrieved the velvet box from the safe, revealing 2 platinum bands inscribed with a Celtic knot pattern that represented eternity. But what made these rings special was the tiny diamond chips embedded in the design, stones that had been recut from Sarah's grandmother's engagement ring, preserving family history while creating something new. "They're beautiful," breathed Tom Henderson, taking his bride-to-be's hand. "Sarah, look at how the light catches those diamonds." Emily watched the couple admire their rings, remembering her own excitement when Michael had proposed with that simple solitaire from the Davis Square pawn shop. That ring was long gone, lost in the chaos of Victoria's deception, but the love it had represented had survived everything. "When's the wedding?" Isabelle asked, ringing up the sale with the efficiency of someone who'd been handling the business side of things for 3 years. "October 15th, Sarah said. "Right here in Westford, at the old church on Elm Street. Mom designed the rings for the Parkers' renewal ceremony there last month," Isabelle mentioned. "It's such a beautiful venue." Emily's heart did a little skip at the mention of renewal ceremonies. Tonight was special for reasons the Hendersons couldn't know. Tonight was the 3rd anniversary of her own renewal ceremony with Michael, the day they'd officially recommitted to each other after everything they'd been through. The bell above the door chimed, and Michael entered carrying coffee and pastries from the bakery down the street. At 42, he looked healthier than he had in years. The pharmaceutical pallor was gone, replaced by the ruddy complexion of someone who spent time outdoors. Running the business side of Crystal Memories had given him purpose without the cutthroat pressure of the financial world Victoria had forced him into. "Good morning, everyone," Michael said, setting the pastries on the counter. His movements were easy, natural, none of the rigid control that had characterized William Harper. Recovery had given him back more than just his memories. It had returned his essential self. "Mr. Walker, perfect timing," Tom Henderson said, shaking Michael's hand. "We were just picking up our wedding rings. They're incredible." Michael's face lit up with genuine pride as he examined Emily's work. "My wife is the most talented jeweler in New England," he said, and Emily felt the same flutter of happiness she'd felt when he'd started referring to her as his wife again, instead of the careful Emily he'd used during those first uncertain months of recovery. After the Hendersons left, the family settled into their morning routine. Michael reviewed the custom orders that had come in through their website. Crystal Memories had developed a reputation far beyond Westford for Emily's unique designs and their story of love overcoming impossible odds. Isabelle updated their social media accounts, posting photos of new pieces with captions that drew in customers from across New England. "Grace called this morning," Michael mentioned, pulling up their appointment schedule on the computer. "Miguel's graduation is next week, and she wanted to make sure we could still make it." Emily smiled. Grace and Miguel had become extended family over the past 3 years. Grace had moved to Westford 6 months after Victoria's arrest, buying a small house just 2 streets away from theirs. Miguel, now 11 and thriving, spent most afternoons at Crystal Memories, doing homework at the back table while regaling them with stories about middle school drama and his latest obsession with astronomy. "Wouldn't miss it," Emily said. "Has he decided what he wants for a graduation gift?" "A telescope," Isabelle said without looking up from her phone. "He's been dropping hints for weeks." "Then a telescope it is," Michael said. "I'll drive into Boston this afternoon to pick one up." The easy domesticity of the conversation still amazed Emily sometimes. 3 years ago, she'd been a struggling jewelry store clerk, grieving a husband she thought was dead. Now she was a successful artisan, married to a man who remembered their entire history together, raising a daughter who'd found her place in the world. "Oh, before I forget," Isabelle said, finally looking up from her phone. David asked if he could come to dinner tonight. Emily and Michael exchanged glances. David Chen, Dr. Chen's nephew and Isabelle's boyfriend of 6 months, had become a regular fixture in their home. He was a sweet kid, respectful and obviously smitten with Isabelle, but it still took some adjustment for Emily to watch her daughter navigate her first serious relationship. "Of course," Emily said, "but remind him that we're doing the renewal ceremony afterward. He's welcome to stay for that too, if he wants." Isabelle blushed slightly. "I already told him. He thinks it's romantic that you guys renew your vows every year." "It's not romantic," Michael said with mock seriousness. "It's practical. After everything we've been through, I want to make sure your mother knows I'm not going anywhere." Emily laughed, the sound echoing through the shop like wind chimes. "As if I'd let you." The afternoon passed quickly, filled with customers and the pleasant rhythm of shared work. Michael returned from Boston with a professional-grade telescope that would make Miguel the envy of his astronomy club. Emily finished setting the stones in a custom engagement ring for a customer who was proposing next weekend. Isabelle helped an elderly man select a charm bracelet for his granddaughter's sweet 16. As closing time approached, Emily found herself looking forward to the evening ahead. Their renewal ceremony had become a private tradition, just the three of them in their backyard garden, speaking words that reaffirmed their commitment not just to each other, but to the life they'd rebuilt together. "Mom," Isabelle said as they locked up the shop, "I made something for tonight." She pulled out a small velvet pouch, revealing a pair of matching silver rings. The bands were simple but elegant, inscribed with a pattern that looked familiar but unique. "I used the design from Dad's old music sheets," Isabelle explained. "The notes from Sweet Caroline, the song that helped bring back his memories." Emily's eyes filled with tears. The rings were exquisite, but more than that, they represented everything their family had become. Art born from struggle, beauty created from broken pieces, love that had survived the impossible. "Izzy?" Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "They're perfect. I wanted you to have something that was just ours," Isabelle said. "Something that belonged to our family, not to anyone else's story." As they walked home together, Emily, Michael, and Isabelle, with David joining them at the corner, Emily thought about how love could be both fragile and unbreakable. Victoria's drugs had stolen Michael's memories, but they couldn't steal the essential connections that bound their family together. Time had been lost, but not love. Identity had been confused, but not the heart. Tonight, in their garden surrounded by flowers Emily had planted and vegetables Michael tended, they would promise each other another year of building something beautiful from the fragments of what they'd almost lost. And tomorrow, they would wake up and continue the work of being a family, imperfect, resilient, and grateful for every ordinary moment they'd been given back. The crystal memories that gave their shop its name weren't just the jewelry they created, but the precious moments they'd learned to treasure. Isabelle's laughter, Michael's off-key singing in the shower, Grace's homemade tamales on Sunday afternoons, the quiet satisfaction of work that mattered. They had been broken, all of them, but like the scattered pieces of a shattered gem, they'd been reformed into something even more beautiful than what they'd been before.